morning, brother. How are you doing?
Good. Good morning. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great.
Cool, man. This is great. I'm glad we finally made some time to make this happen.
Yeah, thanks.
Uh,
Thanks for the invite. That's really, really cool. I love what you're doing with this thing.
oh, thank you
Um,
so much.
yeah, it's uh, having these kinds of conversations breaks through the video. It just
Mm.
sort of makes them three-dimensional, which is so important because uh, you know, uh, I mean, video just kind of makes us two-dimensional. It makes us just figures on a screen. So what you're doing is really cool and very important, and I'm so happy about it and about the success you've had so far.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. And yeah, and I try to do it like a deep dive, I mean, because for me, every Mason I meet is fascinating, and unique in their own right. I've met so many brothers from all walks of life and all different personalities and all different interests. And I just am fascinated by human beings in general. And when you combine that with my interest in masonry, we got a show.
Yeah, very, very cool, very
Yeah.
cool.
So brother Martin Gruszka, welcome to the show. Um,
Oh, is this on? We're on right now.
Oh yeah, this is how I usually start like this,
Okay.
because it kind of keeps us real, and
Yeah,
we're actual people, and
yeah,
why be pretentious,
absolutely.
especially as Masons. I think we're supposed to be really down to earth and regular people
Yeah,
in regular lodges.
that's right.
Um, so yeah, the first thing I would like is, I guess, to hear a little bit about you as a person. Who is Brother Martin Gruszka? Where do you come from? What's your background, your biography, your life story, and then how that sort of led up to Masonry. I think that's a really interesting part of this show, is to get to know that person on a more personal level.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out who I am really. So
sure.
so let's just talk about the sort of the history, because I think that's much easier.
Sure.
Um, I actually, if you look on my Twitter, you'll find probably what I've found so far to be the best description, which is, an entrepreneur, a tech guy, a father, born in charming little city in southwestern Poland, and a proud American. um, and really, that is me. I'm kind of a hybrid. I was born in Poland, and
What was the name of your small town or city that you lived in Poland, where you were born?
well, the small town is Świdnica, which is nice. Try to say that a couple of times, right,
Yeah.
with all those Polish consonants.
I
But
feel like I might need to drink some Slilovica
there
before
you
I can
go.
say that,
That's right.
which I really like.
Yep, precisely. But
Yeah.
the largest city nearby is Wrocław or Breslau, which is more known by its German name, and you'll find it on the maps and stuff like that. So, yeah, close to that German-Czech border right there, which is beautiful.
Ah,
It starts getting hilly and mountainous there. So not quite like the big mountains and stuff like that in the south, but a beautiful country, and not as cold or as gray as people can imagine.
mm,
Just typically thinking about those parts of the world. But yeah, I was born into a gray situation. Let's just put it that way, right? Because I was born
right.
behind the Iron Curtain, and uh, my father left uh, left Poland. I want to say in 1987, maybe a little bit earlier. Um, Complicated sets of reasons. Some of them had to do with him getting in trouble with the local authorities there.
Mm,
Um, at that time, there was quite a bit of like strikes and solidarity. I don't know how involved he was with that. That part of the story is still sort of, kind of behind sort of family folklore,
I see.
but
You don't have
but
absolute clarity on it.
I don't. Well, and I was a kid, right?
Right, right.
And at that time, even, but I also know that family issues were in play, right?
Mm,
So But so he left for Germany. He was essentially lived in a refugee asylum in West Germany. And from there, he got an asylum, a political asylum to the United States on the basis of being a member of Solidarity and the whole, union strikes against communism, et cetera, et cetera. And we followed. So my mom, my sister, and I joined him in 1990. So early 1990. I was probably one of the last political refugees out of Poland. I mean,
Wow.
because I came here under that status, under the same status that he received.
Wow. Early 1990s. So how old were you at that time?
14.
Wow. That
Yeah.
must have been a major adjustment as a 14-year-old.
It was, I went, Jeremy, I went from living in a nice apartment, but, no running water, outhouse, and no telephone, right?
Right.
But that doesn't mean we were necessarily poor. It's just that we didn't have the infrastructure. Okay,
Right.
to joining my dad here, who by then had sort of graduated from starting with nothing to having a little townhouse with a boat and trips to Lake Anne. We lived in Burke, Virginia. And so I think that he caught on to that last sort of tale of the possible middle class life that you could have. And so, but for us, it was a dramatic change. It was a dramatic change. So,
Wow. And how was your English when you first came? I spoke
zero.
Wow.
Yeah.
So was it just total immersion? You got thrown into the public school system or what?
On the car ride from JFK, I remember, and my sister has a memory of that too, which means that hope that somewhat real is us. We were learning the ABCs, right? So
Wow.
learning the English alphabet
In the car ride from JFK.
In the car ride from JFK.
Wow, that is immersion right there.
I mean, it wasn't like it wasn't like you will learn. It was just hey, you need to start learning your ABCs and stuff.
Yeah.
I caught tail end of 8th grade here. Went on to high school. The kids were amazing. They were incredible. I had I didn't have a typical sort of hard immigrant life, somehow facing bullying or discrimination or anything like that
good.
here.
That's good
Nothing
because
like that.
That happens too often.
It does.
Especially people that don't know the language well, younger kids that go into American schools that get picked on.
Yeah, no.
Glad that didn't happen.
It did not. So I was lucky and privileged, probably.
Right.
I mean, I just continue to say, luck has just been to this day is just and privilege has been an incredible part of my life, and I'm so grateful for it.
Oh, thank God.
And so so we were immersed within 6 months. We could communicate. We were part of the sort of English as a second language program and stuff like that. By the time I graduated high school, I had already gone through the process. My accent was probably a little bit thicker than it is right now, but I was taking not necessarily AP English, but English with the American sort of.
Yeah. I don't hear much of an accent at all. I mean, your English seems completely normal and American English to me. But so what about university? I mean, did you go to university and study anything in particular?
I did. I went to, I started at George Mason University in a computer science program. That didn't go so well for me. I ended up graduating with a business degree from an online program later on. So, but I was a coder. So school not going so well for me at GMU was again luck because at that time timing was late 90s. I was really, I mean, I was a tech guy, right? So I was writing software, caught a break, and was hired by a company to write code. So so
Yeah,
I
that's
don't know.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, especially in our lodge. I mean, a lot of the viewers don't know we're actually in the same lodge in Ashburn, Sterling. You're the first Mason I've met. I met when I first walked into that lodge.
Yeah.
Uh, Actually, which it was
Yeah.
the wrong night. I was coming for the monthly dinner, and it was the right day. It was Tuesday, but it was the wrong Tuesday. But you were very gracious and polite and nice to me, and explained, what the right date is, and that I'm welcome to come back. That was really nice. But you were my first, not the first Mason I met, but the first Mason I met in our lodge. Um,
I'm sorry about that, by the
no,
way.
it was a great experience, brief and great. And what was I going to say? Oh, a lot of the Masons in our lodge are working in the IT sector.
Yeah.
And I wonder if there's a connection, to the sort of the logic you build in your mind and the logical way of thinking, and especially as a coder and working in IT, and how that might connect to, what is it called? Logic, rhetoric, and grammar, the trivium.
Yeah. Okay.
The trivium, yeah, the 7 liberal arts and
Yeah.
sciences, the first 3 that are supposed to help you think correctly, so you can actually learn things. So logic is very important. So I wonder, I mean, do you think that working in computers and IT has helped you perhaps think in a more logical and rigorous way about things, and maybe an unbiased way? I don't know.
Yeah. Perhaps I think that there's definitely a part of it, and there's definitely a sort of and I have a built-in pattern recognition and logic, sort of inherent logic tendency, right?
Right.
To organize things, to split them into categories, to find
Yes.
patterns and think about systems and flows and how all these things connect.
Me too. Me too.
Having said that, I think that this is creative. This is a creative process, not necessarily. I think coding is a creative process.
That's true.
I mean, you're dealing in abstractions. You're starting from sometimes from scratch, which is incredibly hard to do in software development.
Yeah.
And to organize, to sort of group, to abstract, object-oriented programming and stuff like that. Create these models. I mean, algorithms are pretty much, in many cases, they're well known and defined. They're taught in computer science, right? Just the kind of the if then and logic gates and all that stuff. But how do you group all that stuff into something that's functional? How do you bring it to life, right?
Right.
That's a creative process.
And make it user friendly.
And right,
something Don't forget about
that. Yes, something that coders are horrible at.
Often, yes.
I am.
Yeah, I did some coding in the past, but mine was mostly Visual Basic for Access. I was an Access programmer for many years. Yeah, and did a lot of Access programming especially for the San Francisco Department of Public Health. This was in the probably the 90s. Yeah. And early 2000s. And I just remember I really enjoyed the process, though, of sort of collecting intelligence, from the folks about what they wanted the system to do, and taking notes, and then coming back to them with process diagrams and saying, does this sound right? Is this what you want? Have I forgotten anything? It's really like you said, it's a creative process, and it does require strong conceptualization skills and organizational skills, good planning, and then it's a challenge for the programmer to figure out what could be the most elegant design here. I don't want to overcode and make this really difficult to adjust later. And too complicated to fix later if there's problems or people want adjustments. So how can I make this very elegant and simple, but yet completely effective and do the job, and allow that flexibility to be built in from the beginning, right?
Yeah.
For things that might want to be changed later.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, I think for me, it maybe has affected my thinking and my logic and improved it perhaps. But it may also be like a chicken or the egg. Maybe I was already that way, and that's why I got into coding.
Right.
in computer programming early on.
That's
Um,
precisely right.
you know, and maybe it just got stronger through that. Um, but it was a good experience. I learned a lot.
It's it forces you to think multidimensionally, because yeah, how do you go back between that business community or that stakeholder, like whatever, the user, the end user, right? You got to put yourself into their shoes and have empathy and be able to think from their perspective. What are they trying to accomplish? What are they doing?
Right.
What are they telling me? What are they
Right.
not telling me? What's between the lines?
Right. Right. You
And
have
are
to
they
also
are
anticipate.
right, solutioning and stuff like that, and then to take that and take what's essentially, whatever the tool framework tools you have at your disposal, you used access, and then turn it into something that does not only maybe accomplish what they asked for, but maybe even anticipates or goes beyond that,
Right.
and does it in a simple way. I mean, just so
Yeah.
we're talking logic, we're talking, soft skills, empathy, and business skills, and being able to understand their business process and stuff like that. It's
That's
a
right.
tremendous. Yeah, it is. I mean, but to me, it's very creative. It's a creative endeavor.
Yeah, absolutely. So how did you go from, your IT career and everything to Freemasonry? I mean, when did you get into Freemasonry? How did that whole process happen? What drew you to the craft, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes. The reason I'm pausing, Jeremy, is because I'm reconsidering whether the story that I've told before is even, whether that's the story really. I mean,
Right. Yeah.
if you know, what I mean, it's how do you get into something like this?
Right.
Just so let's just talk facts, right, and history.
Okay.
I don't have a Masonic background. I was raised in a Catholic tradition, which, especially out of a country like Poland, typically is not. Poland has an active Masonic community, by the way, but I wasn't, most of my life has been here.
Right.
So it's not like Masonry was sort of inherent for me, right? Or something that I was likely to spot. But I did get into a period of in my life where I started being deeply unsatisfied and noticed that I was participating in some sort of routine that involved
Mhm.
consumption work, right? Where um, you I enjoy what I do, and I
Sure.
enjoyed what I did.
Hmm.
I switched my career since, but this I don't know what you want to call it, rat race, whatever. I
Right.
wasn't
Right.
necessarily chasing any particular career, but this routine and
Also known as the grind,
the grind, the
daily
realization.
grind.
Thanks, yeah,
Yeah.
the realization that there is just less and less satisfaction. And what is it? What's going on? What's going on with me?
Right.
My grandfather passed away, and I traveled back on short notice for his funeral. And I remember being in this old, and so by the way, southwest Poland, right? So those were used to be kind of, those lands changed hands. They were for the most part in German hands and stuff like that. So, but a lot of the infrastructure, churches, and things like that are very much sort of Central European in nature, right? And so I was in this old Catholic church. I don't even know if it was Catholic. Who knows? But I mean, now the service was Catholic, but the church itself, what kind of history did it have? But I thought there was a symbol carved into one of the stones. Okay, and I remember as a kid
Mm.
looking at it back then, right, and going, "That's curious. What is that?" And I swear, I swear it was a square and compass, right? And so, as an
Yeah.
adult, when I returned, um, and I was there for the funeral, I saw it, and I made this recognition because I had by then had lived in the United States, and I went, I think that's a Masonic symbol.
Hmm.
No, that's why I paused, because I really question now whether that truly triggered me to seek masonry.
Mm.
But it was
Interesting.
just interesting for me to kind of to be there and to make that connection as an adult, And shortly thereafter, I started looking into the craft, into
Mm.
the fraternity. I reached out to the Grand Lodge of Virginia, asked what does the process look like. They connected me with Ashburn, which once again was just such great luck, because I think Ashburn is a phenomenal lodge,
It really is.
so uh, I connected with the secretary there, and went from there. So
Had you done any like Masonic reading before you reached out to try to find a lodge? I mean, to sort of educate
yeah,
yourself on what free. Oh, you did. Okay.
yeah, I did, and it was mostly internet based. So I was going into it. Um, I saw the sort of the conspiracy theory based stuff out there, and it was just so extreme and so uh it just didn't fit my world. I was just like, this is nuts. That's not what this is about,
Right.
and I think that there's another aspect of this is just my I gotta tell you that my civics based education was really transformative here in the United States. When I learned about the American government and the people and the philosophy, the ideals of enlightenment that led to the formation of the Constitution, and the folks,
Right.
however imperfect, that participated in that. Many of them were Masons. I knew that. So weighing the stuff, the weird stuff that I saw on the internet with the conspiracy stuff, and then just knowing and having a love for our institutions and how this country works, how the United States is put
Mm-hmm.
together, the sort of the how it came to be, and the ideals it espouses,
Mm,
the people
mm.
that were Masons. Well, I was just like, no, that there's something else here. So yeah.
So do you think that the thing that really attracted you the most to Masonry was sort of the virtues and the underlying principles of
Yes.
Freemasonry?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
It was the ideals of enlightenment which I could see, uh, and the shared values that really I love, and I could see that in the fraternity, that prompted me to go, yeah, I'm going to go through this, because I think that this will allow me to continue to grow and get from this grind to
Right.
maybe something else, right? To something
Right.
better, to something where I serve some greater good.
Hmm. Interesting. So Brother Martin, you were also Worshipful Master at Ashburn Sterling. I don't remember the year it was, but not that far back. Um,
2017. Yeah.
there you go. And you probably learned a lot of lessons during that period of time. And I often wonder, like, what's the difference between being a worshipful master of a lodge and being a manager of a business, for example, because I'm sure you've done both now.
Hmm.
And what are the similarities? What are the differences? What kind of lessons did you learn? Yeah, just tell me about your story as worshipful master.
Yeah, sure. Um, well, you very quickly, there are certainly parallels, no question. And
Yes.
thank you for that question, Jeremy.
I have no idea where it came from,
Yeah, I
Martin.
have no idea where it came from. Oh my goodness. No,
Yeah,
there's certainly parallels though there. You learn very quickly about who you are and what your weaknesses are.
right.
And so while I was in the East, I kept, and even thereafter, I thought that this was the greatest leadership school I have ever had a chance to be a part of.
No, that's interesting. Wow.
Which begs the question is, should I have been in the East as a student of leadership, right? It
Right.
is the is being worshipful master supposed to teach you something, or are you supposed to be already sort of
Right.
kind of uh,
Right.
experience with that,
Or perhaps a little of both.
or perhaps a little bit of both, right? Or have some talent. For
Hmm.
me, although the topic of leadership, and by then I had already had some on the business side, some leadership experience, management experience, let's just put it that way, not leadership experience. I being a worshipful master exposed me to really the hard, tough part of leadership, right? Which is you get to learn. You have to be honest about what your weaknesses are. You have to be honest about the fact that this is a group of people, of individuals, who are looking at you and looking up to you to help to make their Masonic year great, right? And they all have their own agendas, and they all have their wants as well. And it's your job to help them recognize that. Not necessarily to help recognize your own, but to help people make their own journey through Masonry, make it as meaningful as great as it can be. So humility, is important. Being aware of your own ego, being aware of where you suck, because I did suck in many ways.
As we all do.
Yeah. It was eye-opening for me, and I would say, wow, what a great, if it is meant to be a school of leadership up there, if that role allows for that, because I'm still not sure if that's its purpose, then wow, what a great experience that is. And then I would recommend it to anyone. It will change you.
Right. Well, that's really interesting. I mean, it seems to me, I've never been a worshipful master, but it seems to me that obviously it is a leadership position. There's a lot of management that's involved. It takes a lot of time. So in that sense, it kind of connects to the mundane world, business world. But what I see as kind of unique about it is this spiritual dimension, that you're not just a leader, but you have to exemplify some of these Masonic virtues, or you have to try to.
Right.
And you don't get that kind of pressure in the regular workplace. You don't have to be humble as a boss and the job. That's not one of the expectations. It's nice if you are. That's a good quality in a human being, but you have some bosses that are very arrogant, condescending, because that's not generally seen as an expectation of the job. Whereas as a worshipful master, people are looking to you to be kind of a role model citizen in a way, a role model Mason at least. Not perfect, because none of us are, but you should try while you're worshipful master to improve yourself maybe a little more intensely. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, you should try, and you should be honest about the way you're doing it.
Sure.
Because I've also seen a lot of virtue signaling in the East as well, right?
Right.
And people can see right through that.
Yep, that's true.
I mean, they'll nod, and they'll do the do guard, and they'll give you the pleasantries, but they can see right through your fakery.
Right.
So you have to be absolutely honest about who you are. And, if you the fact that maybe you were still working on those virtues, right? Or on that behavior. So yeah, it's super important. I would say that if anything, Masonry, espousing those ideals, I like that word.
Yeah.
Is a necessary component of the job. None of us has them all. We should do them, and we should also do them in the business world as well, because that's it. Truly, I mean, is what makes you a great boss or a manager, right? Is to
a lot of new research is showing that too.
That's right. So, but then there are other aspects of it which bleed from just the practical, right? For example, communication skills. Excuse me. How do you communicate with the lodge? How do you ask for help, right? Deploying understanding to how to deploy different types of communication tools to keep the lodge informed, to keep it inspired. You're going to use a different set of tools to do that than you are to organize a picnic or a luncheon or a breakfast. And so it was kind of helpful to bring that kind of experience from the business world into the lodge, to help me with the practical.
Well, especially nowadays when there's so much being communicated constantly all the time on so many different platforms. We got our work email, we got our private email. You may have your Twitter, you may have your Facebook, you may use Messenger to communicate. You may make phone calls, you may use Skype, now you may use Zoom. I mean, we're just flooded with information and communications all the time. So I think that more so now, and that means that in the lodge, when we're trying to communicate, we have to really figure out the most efficient way to do that, that gets what's important across to people as quickly as possible, and such that they're able to remember it, or at least get a tickler about it or whatever. But yeah, that's a challenge. I remember when I was, before we kind of shut down with COVID, I was just starting to get comfortable using my Google Calendar with freemasonic stuff, because I had started to get everything full, and I needed to really look at my calendar and get it all organized. And it was amazing how quickly my calendar got filled up with all the Masonic stuff that you could enjoy. All the different meetings and trips and appendant bodies and this and that. And, I had 3 or 4 things a week in my calendar. Not that I would go to all of them, but they were all there. It's hard to manage, it's hard to manage all this stuff.
Well, you are a chief communicator in these, for sure. And it's the job of the Worshipful Master. I really do believe that as well, to effectively communicate and sometimes spoon feed, I don't think that's a shared philosophy, by the way, but I saw my role as how do I take this week's schedule and present it in such a way that not only will it inform, but it will also prompt people to move, right? So like, are the necessary pieces of information in that schedule that it's communicated out, so that there is no thinking for that brother, right? So, hey, on Thursday, we're having a lodge meeting at such and such lodge, right? Or such and such lodge is having a lodge meeting, not a regular one. I'm trying to get a fraternal visit going. Well, okay. So it's not just about the fact that it's taking place, because that informs, but also, is there a carpool? Are we starting a carpool? Where are we meeting? What time? Where are we heading? Are we going to meet ahead of time, right? Not and let's do it also in a way that doesn't overwhelm, but it's good enough that I can just pick up my phone and go, oh, guys are getting together at 5:30. All right, I'll be there, right?
Right.
I just ease that path. So so that takes work to be able to frame and sort of massage the information in such a way that will make it easy. And so yes, it's a little bit of spoon feeding for the verse.
Yeah, absolutely. I've found, people have different communication styles, and I work in business development right now a lot with the federal government. And I've found that, I like to communicate very clearly and as concisely as possible in my emails, especially when I'm communicating with people, and often use bulleted lists, get right to the point, make it very clear so as to not have too many back and forth emails. And some people have a different style where they'll write like a long email with a lot of narrative. And I often, would prefer if people like that can you just break this out into bullets? What are the key things here you need me to respond to? I mean, how do you, which style do you prefer?
Well, I have a tendency for the long-winded. I do. But the way I handle it is, and the way I tried to handle it back then, was to use different tools for different to accomplish different things, right? So the long-winded email would be mostly aspirational, and that is my tendency. Mostly aspirational, mostly about informing and maybe inspiring, if I'm able to get the message through. That's the job of an email, right? We started Slack. We created a Slack channel during my year. And that one, the purpose there was to create different channels within Slack, so that, and it was mostly about tactics, right? Hey, we need this done, or somebody's looking for this information, or can we get together? I mean, we had an ice storm during my year during the well, let's just put it this way: we had an ice storm, and we organized the brothers to clean up and quickly getting the place ready using Slack, and so that was very tactical. It wasn't overwhelming. Email wasn't in play, and then emergencies are texts, right? So you can definitely deploy different types of tools, right? You're not going to use a bullhorn like an email, to basically to do tactical things with the
Yeah.
brother. You're going to use a different tool. So
No, that makes a lot of sense, and thank you for the Slack, because I think it's proven to be very effective. We're still using it today in our lodge. It's fast, it's easy. Brothers like it, and the sustainability of that platform for communicating is a testament to that decision.
yeah.
So yeah, thank you for that. So yeah, just going back to the Worshipful Master experience again, I'm wondering, from what was the biggest personal lesson you learned as Worshipful Master?
I think that's my daughter outside, by the way.
Hey, that's my son. That's my son.
Oh, is that your
That's
son?
my son. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Don't worry. Keep going.
No,
Go
no
ahead.
worries. Yeah. What was the biggest personal lesson I learned? It's not about you. My ego was pretty. I was very egocentric when I went in the East, and I needed to tame that, and I needed to be more aware of the needs of individual brethren within the lodge and be a little bit more sensitive about them. And I don't think I was, and so the lesson really has been, it's not all about you, and it's being able to sort of step back from your ego and to recognize the sort of the dynamics within the lodge wasn't something that was a very good at. I'm still not good at it, but I think I'm better than I was. So,
well, yeah, I mean, and lessons you learn aren't going to necessarily fix your personal issues or whatever they may be, but at least it brings it more to your conscious awareness as something that you want to work on as part of your life journey.
yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the way I see it, because I know a lot of what my personal problems are, and I don't see them as being things that I could just fix overnight and just suddenly stop. Oh, that's wrong. I'll just change, and then tomorrow it'll never happen again.
No,
Not really likely.
Yeah, but
habits.
But the awareness, even that there is a problem, right?
Yeah,
that is a sophisticated problem.
Hang on one second. I gotta go
worries.
see what my son wants. Hang on one second.
No worries.
Okay. Nothing important. So back. So there's a little edit there.
No worries. No worries at all.
With COVID, this is just the way it is, man. We're all working from home.
Well, and that's why I asked him if it was my daughter, because that happens all the time.
Yeah.
It's like, knock on the door. Daddy, can I come in?
Yeah, and oftentimes they just want to come in. They want to be around you, especially
around
when you're really busy. That's when they really want to come around you.
Well, now that you're doing these podcasts and stuff like that, you're like a rock star. So they're like, oh, my daddy's doing something cool. I want to see what.
Yeah, he always likes to come in, and sometimes we have these Zoom meetings or like presentations on like refracted light or Zoom happy hour with some brothers. He always wants to come in and say hi, and that's fine, especially in the more informal situations. And it's even fine now, and even a business environment these days. Everybody understands.
Everybody understands.
Yeah,
for sure.
What the other thing I would ask is, what advice would you give to somebody who's coming into the East as Worshipful Master? What kind of advice would you give them?
Yeah, have a plan. Have a North Star. That is the biggest advice that I would give them, is have a plan. It doesn't have to be super detailed, but put enough meat on the bones that you can actually start executing, because time flies so quickly when you're during that year. And and you really only have maybe 9 months to get things done, right? During the year, to make whatever tiny improvement you want to make in a lodge, or have an event or something, whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish, improve membership, improve ritual, put on better degrees. Have a plan, and really only expect 9 months, because after that, it's your job to get the next crew ready, to get the next set of masons. And there's a little bit of a lame duck issue going on too, right? Where it starts getting a little bit harder to get things done, because while you're in month 10, 11, the upcoming Worshipful Master, if you are fortunate to have him, is having his conversations as well, and they may not be necessarily aligned with yours. So that's, but then there's another aspect of this, which is the North Star aspect, and which is kind of tied in. What is the North Star? Have some sort of a mission or something that guides your value system. And the reason why it's important, because there will be situations where you will know what the right decision is. You'll have two opposing questions or two opposing forces or something that where a decision is going to make one set of, I don't know, individuals, or it's not it's the outcome isn't clear, right? So maybe some people will be happy with your decision, some will not, right? And so how do you then determine, if you don't have the right information, what that decision should be? And that's where you consult your North Star. What is my value? What do I believe in? What am I trying to accomplish? Doesn't matter what it is. It really doesn't matter what it is, so long it is. I feel very strongly about that. You know, it's going to be very helpful.
That's really good advice.
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't know about in masonry, but I'm sure this comes up in masonry. I mean, it comes up in life, but often not often, thank God, not often, but sometimes you have decisions to make in life where you feel like, oh my God, no matter which way I go, things are not looking good. You know, and it's the toughest decision. You don't know what to do. And those are often situations where you really seek advice from somebody else. Like, what would you do? What do I do in this situation? I'm really stressed out. This is a very difficult situation. I'm really worried. And, you know, sometimes some people would, you know, maybe go to what you're saying, your North Star, look at the, you know, what was your goal? Remember the goal here. Remember what your value was that you said was so important. Reflect on that. Some people might choose to pray. Or talk to a mentor.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you deal with those kind of situations? I don't know if that ever came up as a worshipful master, you know, a hard situation like that, but I'm sure you've encountered them in life.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Prayer, meditation, whatever the outlet is, whatever allows you to contemplate on the issue, is super important. Yeah, absolutely. It can help. You know, there are times where you may not have enough time, though, right? So maybe that's the logical part of me coming out on this one. But in some instances, especially in those instances where you don't have a lot of information, you may not have a lot of time to make to explore or find the information. So, you know, meditation and prayer can help, but if the decision needs to be made today, and somebody will not be happy about the decision, then what do you do, right? So that's why, so for those longer term decisions where you may have some time, right, where it's more about, well, which direction do we take the lodge in, right? Or what do I do with this brother who's struggling, who came to me and that's Alexa, by the way.
I was going to say, your wife sounds so formal.
Oh my goodness, we are so super wired and so automated, aren't we?
I know.
You know, that's done, and then it's going to be finished.
Yes.
So where was I in my super, you know, contemplative discussion?
Well, we were talking about the Worshipful Master stuff, you know, but there's a few other things I want to talk to you about on this list before we get too far over the hour mark.
No worries.
One other thing is about, you know, and I guess this could tie to, you know, leadership in the lodge and being a Worshipful Master, but how do we ensure that candidates get the experience they're looking for out of masonry and have a transformative experience? Because that's sort of the promise, is that you'll come in, it'll help facilitate your personal growth and change. It'll make you a better man, you know, and so you can better serve your community and the world. But how do we do that? How do we help candidates?
Yeah, we have to get over and get past this mass conferral bullshit. I am absolutely opposed to it.
Right, assembly line conferral.
Right. Now I've seen it done well, and frankly, I've seen it done well at Scottish Rite. Scottish Rite does it really well. I had a phenomenal
Mm,
experience, and I was in the audience, right? So it's not like I was out there. Well, I was exemplifying one of the degrees, but the first three degrees have to be done one or two individuals, and then the important parts, like in the third degree, those have to be done individual.
I
It is
agree.
our job to give these candidates a phenomenal experience. It is the fundamental job of a
Mm,
lodge to put on a good degree,
yeah.
to practice, to know their lines. And I think that there, for a while there, we sort of we started, um, we dropped our standard. We dropped our standard to allow more members in, right? Or to
Numbers.
get to exactly
Yeah.
to come in numbers. But it's a vicious cycle, and it's not good for the lodge, and we just have to get past that. So
Mm,
just get, individual,
right.
or at most two maybe.
Right. I was on a Zoom sort of Masonic happy hour a couple of nights ago. And we were discussing how there's so many different appendant bodies now and orders and other things that you can join, that a lot of them end up just being supper clubs, that really distract and take away from a Mason's time. And some folks on the call were saying that this takes away from the Blue Lodge,
Mhm.
and which is the core of Masonry, and that Blue Lodge experience. And because everyone is so distracted on so many other Masonic things that are going on outside of the Blue Lodge, that the Blue Lodge has suffered on account of that.
Yeah.
And if there were less appendant bodies and less, outer orders, and for example, say you only had the Blue Lodge, that's all that existed. Maybe the Blue Lodge people would be really good at ritual. We'd have a lot more members. The degree experience would be a lot more transformational. I don't know. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree 100% on that, and I'm not going to make a lot of friends by saying this,
Sure.
but you are not ready to join Royal Arch, being a brand freshly minted, Master Mason.
Mm,
You just aren't. You need to put in the work, the contemplative work. You need to think about those degrees. Spend a year or two.
right.
I hate it, and
Right.
to this day, absolutely hate too. Should I be using such a word as hate as Mason? Maybe that's not right.
Probably
When we would say
not.
things like, "Hey, now that you've graduated your third degree, now that you're a Master Mason, you should do Royal Arch, because you know what? You get to find out the word."
Right.
Cheapens it. This absolutely cheapens the experience if they've had a good one,
Mm-mm.
and cheapens the experience of Royal Arch once they get onto the other side.
Right.
I don't expect to make a lot of friends by saying this, but I
Uh,
don't
but,
think
but as a Mason, you're free to have your opinion. And,
for
I think we encourage debate and dialogue in Freemasonry, and
sure.
open-mindedness, and
Yeah.
reflection, and non-judgment, and toleration of different viewpoints. So I think it's excellent.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Jeremy, for reminding me of that, because it
Yeah.
is true.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
yes.
you're free to say your opinion. You're free to say what your thoughts are, and I think they're good and well formulated thoughts too.
Well,
Um,
I'm only saying it. I'm prefacing it, or setting it that way, because I did hit a lot of opposition,
mm.
in,
Well, yeah,
in that
because I
regard.
think some people, it's the numbers thing. Some people are looking for more members, or maybe their appendant body is not as strong as they'd like it to be. They want more people to be part of it, so trying to recruit in a way. There's that. But I also think that potentially it's not it's unique for every Mason. Like some people have said the same thing about Scottish Rite. You should be a Blue Lodge Mason for a year before you join Scottish Rite. I think in general all that's true. I think that people should take their time and grow first. But I think there are exceptions. You can have Masons that come into Masonry that have been studying about Masonry for years before they even became a Mason, and might know more about Masonic symbolism and the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, and allegory and myth than most Masons, 33rd degree Masons in the Scottish Rite, for example. You never know. And they might be more ready and prepared for those degree opportunities and what they can bring them than someone who's been waiting 20 years.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think it depends on the individual to some degree, but I think generally speaking, what you're saying is accurate.
Well, I just think that, Jeremy, without pushing back too much too hard on that,
Yeah.
it's not the ritual and it's not the awareness of the floor work, in a degree, or even the reading of the esoteric stuff. That's just the construct, the framework.
Mm,
Have you made that journey inside? Have you thought and
right.
contemplated it? Have you grown? Have you really
That's good.
considered the working tools of an apprentice,
Right.
a fellow craft, a master mason?
Have you been practically working with them?
Have you been practically working on that? I
Yes.
don't think that you're ready for those degrees without having made some of
Oh, that's a
that
good point. That's fair.
that internal inside journey.
Right.
Okay,
Right. No,
so
that's fair. Yeah. And I think it could, because there are people that are maybe intellectualize all of
right,
this stuff and maybe have intellectualized it for years, but have they lived it?
right,
Yeah. So, and so I guess, yeah, there's maybe a few different types of people. You have one that hasn't intellectualized it, hasn't lived it, and definitely should wait before they're going through the degrees,
right.
the higher degrees. You have someone who maybe has intellectualized it for years and feels like they can rapidly go through the degrees because it's all up here. And that's not appropriate either. Then you could have someone who has intellectualized it, but also lived it and been through the first 3 degrees and done this for years. That would be the most appropriate person to move forward, right? But then you could have someone who, before they got into masonry, have been living and intellectualizing it, and they might move through really quickly. And you have someone else that's, before they got into masonry, has lived it, but they didn't intellectualize it. I mean, there's so many different situations. So it's never a one size fits all. I mean, that's my personal opinion. It's never a one size fits all. But I think basic guidelines like, take it slow are really good and reasonable general guidelines for everybody.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, innovation in masonry. This leads us to that. So,
as long as we're not on the non-controversial stuff, right?
right, non-controversial, like no incense, for example, very controversial, right?
Mm-hmm.
We wouldn't want lemon-scented lodge, for example.
That's right. Yes.
It needs to smell like mold and mildew to be really Masonic.
Yeah. Yeah. An old man.
And dirty carpets and old man and other things we can't talk about, right?
Right. Exactly. Yes.
But yeah, innovation in masonry. I mean, people have different viewpoints. I think most Masons in general want to keep to the landmarks and keep that tradition and as ancient as possible, because we all appreciate and respect the tradition and the history of masonry. But there have been brothers that have tried to bring up ideas of, hey, wouldn't it be great if we could do this just slightly different? Wouldn't this improve the experience, or wouldn't this improve the goal that we're all trying to seek in masonry? And some people are more open to that, and some people are not. What are your thoughts on innovation in masonry?
Yeah, I mean, we do need to stick to the landmarks and maintain the traditions, and we can't evolve Mason. I think a lot of the pushback on innovations is out of fear that it will somehow change the nature of Masonry, really what
Right.
it's about, right? So I do appreciate being careful, but we cannot stop inventing and innovating, right? It's just so what is innovation? Let's just break that a word, right? Innovation is not invention, right? We're not creating something new. What we're doing is we're taking this existing things that we have, existing tools in place, and trying to see if putting them together in some different ways is going to create interesting results, right? So for example,
it's kind of like a permutation.
Well,
Yeah.
there you go. That's that's basically
Yeah.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Right. So the year that I joined Masonry, Worshipful Master of our lodge would ask everyone to close their eyes and just sort of forget about the external world for just a second prior to opening lodge.
Right.
I love that. I love that. It helped
that's
me
good.
center myself. And I tend to be a fairly anxiety sort of type driven person. It would help me just sort of relax and and be just more centered, right? So in my year, I took that just a little bit step further, and I called it a little, kind of a meditation, right? Let's just meditate together.
Yeah.
And I
Be careful, meditation.
I know.
Isn't that Buddhist?
Exactly. No, it's not.
Right.
It's just about centering yourself, that you are now in this sacred place, which is
Right.
gathering of men,
Right.
So is that innovation? So it's basically, I took something that I experienced, a really wonderful idea, and added a little extra piece of that, I thought it worked. So that's how I see sort of innovation in masonry. And it's just, let's just make this fresh, or add a little bit of music, right? And we're doing that in our lodge.
Yeah.
Just play some music during the balloting process, just to kind of make things a little bit more interesting and different. So I'm nobody's suggesting changes to the ritual. Maybe. Maybe. But that's how I see innovations in masonry. Let's just not be afraid to do things a little bit different. Push the boundaries just a little bit to see if something interesting isn't going to fall out. It's 21st century. We are in a 21st century.
Right.
The world is a completely different place than it was. That doesn't mean that we can't espouse the ideals of enlightenment. All of these things, all of these values that make masonry. Can continue. It's just,
I think there's always room for iterative improvement. While you don't have to lose any of the core fundamental things that make this Freemasonry. But of course, it's a slow process, and it has to go through approvals and all that. But at the end of the day, you can do whatever you want in this world. Just don't call it masonry. True. If you want to do a private club where you do different things, and you say this is nothing to do with masonry and this is the Masonic group, then you're free. Yeah. People do stuff all the time that's un-Masonic, and the Grand Lodge not hunting them down because they're not saying, "Hey, I'm doing this as a representative of Freemasonry." No. Right. So it gets tough when you start to say this is a Masonic thing, and we're regular and a Freemasonic organization or a lodge. Then you got to follow the rules. Mm-hmm. So let's see what else. Masonic education. Do you feel that Masonic education in general in Freemasonry is robust enough?
Yeah. Thank you for that question, Jeremy.
No problem.
Just totally surprised by it, and
nothing was set up in advance. Folks.
Nothing was set up in advance with this one. No, clearly we can do better. Clearly, there's a lot more that can be done, which with education, and so long we're talking about education, leadership training, right? Communication training. These really are Masonic education topics, especially for the officers, right? For the line officers. Why aren't we doing a little bit of that, right? In a really in a good way, so that people like me who get into the East aren't all of a sudden surprised and shocked and just sort of caught off guard by the difficulty of the task. We can do much better as far as education is concerned. This is not a surprise. That's not a controversial statement. There's one aspect of education, Jeremy, that is completely missing in my mind. Okay. And we talked a little bit about this, which is, how do we apply the teachings, the ritual into our own personal life, right? Because what we're told is, okay, I've given you all this information, right? This ritual and stuff like that. You're now a master mason. Go off and apply it in your own life, right? What does that mean?
That's a really good point.
How do I even take that first step? Where does that journey begin, right? There's no even not even an iota of suggestion of how to do that. And so we go off and we, again, we talk about it, right? We read books, we do all this stuff, but none of it is actually, where's the applied masonry?
Yeah. No, that's
Right?
excellent. That's excellent. And in fact, maybe this would be a good little thing to close on. This is something I've been thinking about, an aspect of applied masonry where I think a lot of brothers have challenges, including myself. I mean, the whole idea of admonishing a brother in the most friendly and brotherly of manners.
Mm.
When you see someone that has a fault, how do you do it in the most friendly and brotherly of manners without making them feel bad? How do you correct a brother? And I think a lot of us have a hard time finding that striking that balance, how to do that really well in such a way that you could get that message across, the brother doesn't get their feelings hurt, and everyone feels good about it, and it registers fully, and the brother wants to change.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the dream, right?
Well, that's a soft skill, and skill, and that
is a soft skill,
something that can be taught. Anybody can be taught to become to. For example, right? You can be a manager who's coaching your employees, or a boss who's coaching your employees in performance improvement and stuff like that. So there's definitely ways to do that. We just don't. There's no education. There's no leadership education to say, hey, this is how. These are the kinds of conversations you have when you do whisper good counsel in somebody's ear, right? When you do, so there's absolutely ways to do that. We don't do it at all. As far we don't. Masonic education is missing that, right? And so we say we do that, but oftentimes we just sort of it's not done.
Yeah, I can imagine actually I'm thinking of an idea now. I can imagine a fun way to sort of teach this soft skill, which is so important. Perhaps I'm imagining in our lodge if we did like a skit where, Worshipful Brett and, a brother in the lodge, a couple other brothers are maybe pretending they're in a lodge meeting, and one brother says something wrong or slightly insulting or disrespectful. And then there's a skit we do of the approach to that brother afterwards. And maybe we have two different brothers, one show an example of how not to approach that brother and with your criticism. And then someone else, maybe, Worshipful Brett shows maybe a more idealized way of approaching. Here's how maybe it should be said. And then maybe give a couple variants of that, and let brothers try on their own, and then get constructive feedback on how they did.
Yeah.
I think that's that practical stuff you're talking about. And that's a very important thing, a skill to have, that soft skill in life.
Right. That's right.
Because otherwise what ends up happening is either people approach people with criticism and it goes south and it creates tension and a conflict and it creates a worse problem, or it festers because nobody knows how to deal with it. Nobody wants to approach the person.
Precisely. Yeah, that's precisely right.
So anyway, brother, thank you so much. This has been great. Hope we had a good conversation. I don't know. I liked it.
Jeremy, I loved it. I hope I gave you some value with this conversation.
It was excellent.
I am so proud of you doing this stuff. It's phenomenal. I saw the first one you did with Doug, and I sat there in front of my TV and I just watched an hour of it. And I'm like, this is great. It's engaging. I'm seeing brothers that I love having a great conversation, and they're three-dimensional. It's real. It's honest. So you've got the right formula. Keep going. Keep doing this thing.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And I'll get Doug back on again. We got to get him on. He's a regular now. Guy that started it all. So
that's right. That's right.
All right, brother Martin Gruszka. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Cheers.